Hello and welcome to the Quarantine Room Podcast. I will be your host, Vince Filsone, and we'll be joined by my co-hosts.
Amaris McGlynn.
Silvestri.
Eric Castellanos.
And Mazavin Yasmin.
The focus of today's podcast is genetic modification, and I will be the host of this episode. Genetic modification has been an issue, less of an issue, but more of, I would say, a joint effort of all people to create things that are just literally perfect, right? The idea of genetic modification, genetic engineering, mutations in genetic code are all the same subject, roughly the same subject at least. When you think of genetic modification and engineering, you probably think of the back of food packets or cans of energy drinks that say made with genetic engineering or modification, which just means that the items in the beverage or the food have undergone some form of modification. What that is making it taste stronger or making the caffeine in it more or whatever the case may be. There are some pretty interesting topics on genetic modification. The most interesting, there's a couple that I'll talk about. The two that I find the most interesting are carrots. Carrots haven't always been a thing. They weren't always orange either. For the beginning of their inception, or the time when agriculture became a thing in the human culture, they were purple. And then over time, people. The story is that a king wanted his carrots to be orange, and he had his scientists or the people in charge of agriculture at the time, I suppose. He had them crossbreed them with lighter colored carrots, and slowly became orange. That's more of like a passive way, and DNA can just, like, the DNA in people is like more of a gene therapy kind of an engineering situation, less than a mutation. That usually happens, in labs and in small petri dishes cases for now at least. Which is, obviously something that we hope to expand on, because it's just something that we could eradicate countless diseases and small term to large term like mutations in human code, which are things like blindness, being deaf, or an issue like that. Actually, there has been studies done recently that have tried to use I would say like a nanobot kind of thing, a very small robot, to go into the iris of a blind person and try to cure up their blindness. That, blindness and color blindness are on the same kind of level with how you would fix them, right? It's just an issue with the iris not taking in light, or taking in light and splitting it the wrong way. The other main topic, though, is, and the one that's the scariest, arguably, is designer babies, right? That sounds pretty funny. It sounds pretty weird. It sounds like something that would be in a sci-fi movie. Probably was. But it's a very real thing. It could totally happen. If you think about it, it's happened with countless other species through a little bit of a different genetic thing, like it's called selective breeding, obviously, which is what plants and usually things go through, and humans to a lesser extent go through genetic, tampering that way. However, designer babies are a different situation entirely. They are usually people grown in test tubes or in vats, or like external wombs is what they're called, actually, which are a real thing. They are their genes are changed and made to be different. A designer baby is like you would get, I don't know, like a sandwich made, right? What do you want on the sandwich? You want like the best stuff in the sandwich, right? Or things that you find be the best. In this case, that's the same thing. You can go to a doctor, let's say, in the future, and have them make your baby strong, make your baby, smart, make your baby whatever. And that's a real thing that could happen. But they could also do things like passively that would be more of a global change rather than a single person, because that's the problem with engineering, is genetic engineering, is that in modification, is that it would only affect the person who went through it in all likelihood, because it's not your original genetic code, so it wouldn't propagate the correct way. Um, but for the most part, that's kind of like the coup de grace, kind of like end situation, that the coolest situation. In theory, we could have people that live for double, triple, or forever of a lifetime, right? Like an infinite amount of time. Theoretically, of course, all this is theoretical and pseudoscience, kind of. But the possibilities are endless, right? It would mean the end of disease and defects, um, stuff like that. The question I have for you guys is, um, will this bring about a great divide in the rich who can afford it and the poor who can't? Or will this be an issue similar to just the selective breeding of dogs? Do you think, which one do you think is like a greater magnitude?
I feel like it would be a problem between the rich and poor because obviously, when if, for example, you said this is in theory, if this actually comes to happen, obviously the procedure itself is going to be more expensive and take way longer to do than having a just normal birth pregnancy. So people of the rich that are the richest would most likely be the ones who would decide how their baby is made and what genes and what attribute traits their child would have.
I definitely can see that, and it's also like, what would have to be put in place in that situation to get it to where it would be fair, right? Obviously, at that point, once these things were established, it would no longer be fair. There would probably be a great divide between rich and poor, but there would be like, it maybe wouldn't even be that anymore. Maybe it would just be those who are modified and those who aren't, right? Whatever the case may be. But I feel that something would have to be put in place to limit the amount that you can have, right? Like, oh, you can only have like two per baby. Let's say, like, pick your two, or or it's not, and then it would just be total chaos to where there would be people who were like supermen and women, and then there would just be like regular people.
Yeah,
I mean,
and that
yeah,
would,
and that would also go with like the specific type of baby you want, right? Because different moms would want different types, like characteristics and how they look, hair, eyes, and all that. So like that would also go into like the cost efficiency.
Definitely. Do you guys think a society that's like in many ways built on genetic mutation and modification could be sustainable? I don't mean this necessarily in a human perspective, like humans are the things that are being modified. I more mean like plants, like foods and vegetable, like fruits and vegetables being genetically quote unquote perfect. Do you think that that could be like a big problem, or
I think it'd
I
help us
think
because we could.
that it, yeah, would help. No, you can go, Kyle.
I think it well, okay then. I think it would help us because we could like make it have healthier foods or like be able to produce more, so we could be able to feed like the growing population, and then we could also make more medicinal herbs with it. Like we would be able to like make plants better that could like provide better medicine for us and like cure more diseases, hopefully.
memories?
Right, so I agree with Kyle, and I think that it'll be overall beneficial for us because, well, as he said, we could grow a lot more food to feed the general population. It would stop well, I don't think it would stop world hunger, but I think it would like immensely help the people who are struggling to feed themselves all the time, right? And I also think that it might not be perfect, but it'll be better than what we have now.
I mean, obviously, like, it's an agreeable statement. Um, However, the problem that you run into is making everything like in a way genetically perfect can create, which is similar to how most things go extinct. Really, like, not if they're killed off, but I mean like fruits and stuff, for the most part, are eradicated and go extinct because there's a blight or a disease that's specific to them that will that kills that strain of, let's say, in the most recent, I believe, or pseudo recent, is the Cavendish banana. Right? Everybody knows that the banana that we have now is different than the banana that like our parents had or our grandparents had.
Yeah.
Those bananas were very seedful. They basically were just seeds in like a small amount of the what is a banana, right? But now we have the Chiquita banana that is has seeds that are super small. Very basically, you don't really know that you're having seeds in a banana sometimes unless you look at it. But the reason the Cavendish went extinct was because they were all basically genetically identical, and this blight wound up killing all of them because or a disease. And plants also have diseases. They're a little different. They're like they're similar to like a plague would be for the human race, but it's for plants, which is kind of what a blight is. Similar to the potato blight that happened in Ireland or whatever. Kind of this like the same thing, except potatoes are a little more hardy. But in this case, then connecting this to the human idea, what if everybody was perfect? What if the idea of like gene therapy was something that people had to have, and then we all became a perfect specimen of that? Would we also be able to like? Do you think we would be able to fall in the same fate of everybody dying from a similar disease or something along the lines of the same for plants?
Yeah, I feel like that would be a problem that we would probably encounter because it's like right now we have everything that we have to the best of our knowledge, and we were seeing a slower growth in a lot of stuff, but we can argue the fact that if we make everything perfect, well, you can't make anything perfect really, because perfect is a subjective idea or term, because we don't know what's outside of our own limits or what's outside of our own Earth. If we keep on improving and improving, we're obviously going to find out there's more to this, more to that, and so creating a perfect human being wouldn't fit those scenarios probably.
I have a question. So, like, how would that, how would genetic modification go along with animals that are already like cows, chickens, and all that?
Well, like what do you mean? Like specific? Do you mean like how? Like would it? Like what do you mean specifically?
Like to modify, like you're talking about like crops and like plants and fruits and vegetables that should be genetically made, right?
Yes.
Like that's like perfect in a way. So how would, like, we already have GMO with animals, right? So like how would that affect animals, like farm animals and all that?
Okay, so it's kind of like a similar vein to it's a little. It corresponds with more selective breeding than genetic mutation. People like to say genetic manipulation since it's on unwilling participants for the most part, right? They're animals. But in 1957, chickens were like, and before obviously, but this is like the baseline for the images and the graphics that I've seen. Chickens were like, fairly small, like 800 to 1,000 grams, I would say, which is like a few pounds. And then in 1978, not that much difference, they were double in size. And then from 1978 to 2005, they had doubled again in weight to reach a total of around 4 to 5,000 grams per chicken, or whatever that is corresponded in pounds. So it's less of making them, because obviously you don't want to make like a chicken more resilient, right? Like other than stopping it from having like a disease, let's say, that would wipe them out, you want them to just be plumper. You want them to weigh more, to yield more, similar to plants, I suppose, in that regard, to where it has a bigger yield, right? So that's a real example that most people can see, that most people older than us, of course, would have been able to witness that change from seeing a chicken like a little scrawny chicken to like the giant chickens that we have now. Like hens are like more than 3 times the size of a chicken from the 50s, right? That's similar to, I suppose, what you were asking. As for like things like cows and pigs and stuff, I suppose it's the same, maybe. I'm not really sure. I know the chicken example, but not the other ones.
I have a question. How are they able to genetically modify these like organisms and like cows and like how are they able to do that?
So there are multiple gene editing softwares, or like gene editing, like I don't know what it's called, like gene editing. Let's just call it softwares. Let's just call it softwares. So CRISPR is one of them. CRISPR is like the main one that everybody's heard of. It's clustered, regularity, interspaced, short, palindromatic, repeats, right? Super long. Who knows what that means, right? I mean, I do, but regardless. It's basically just means it's a way for them to pick out pieces of DNA that they've identified. You can identify DNA by doing various things like just looking at them, right? That's one way. There's a couple ways, but that's one way. Let's say if you wanted to, like, you would use CRISPR. I believe CRISPR is more of a thing that's used in humans than other, like, the plants and stuff. Like I said before, plants and things like that are more unwilling participants in this kind of issue and don't really have, like, a say in what happens are put through, like, selective breeding or very minor changes in their genetic code, because it's expensive to do all this stuff. Very expensive now, especially. So they're not going to waste that on, like, a chicken. They would rather just breed two chickens that, like, one is, 1,000 grams, the other one's 1,000 grams. Their offspring should be at least 1,000 grams, theoretically, of course, right? All that is theoretic. But for the most part, they'll find, like, discrepancies in, like, genetic code, which is, DNA just looks like a double helix structure. And it has the code like RNA and tRNA that connect. They'll just, like, pull one out and put, like, another piece in using CRISPR. CRISPR was, like, I'll give you some background on that. CRISPR was something that's used by phages in the body, which are like bacteria, kind of. They're like what gives illness, viruses, stuff like that. All have what are called what are phages that use CRISPR to interject their own code into your cells or the cells of something, and then convert them over to being their cells. It's common in a lot of bacteria and, like I said, viruses. They'll just take over a cell and convert it to them, basically. That's kind of what it is, in essence. It's a little different the way we use it because it has to be, susceptible. It has to be, like, something that a human can work on. Bacteria, in some respects, just aren't human, right? But, if like I said, it's harder to modify a human than, like, a carrot, right? Because you just have to, like, go into the code and change the germination periods of things, or change how they're, like, formed, kind of, right? It's all very, like, for the most part, theoretical and not theoretical. It's all possible, but for right now, it's expensive. Not enough people know about it, and, as is with most science.
So, like, what would be the perfect modification? Like, let's say with the tomato, right? What would be, like, the perfect result?
Well, it's really all up to the person who is doing the modification. So the ideal situation, I would say, would just be, like, yield, right? Just how much or how many tomatoes are grown on a stalk of tomatoes, right? Like, let's say if, like, the regular amount is, like, 1, you would want it to be, like, more than that, and that would be that would just be better. But it could work in, like, colors, right? Maybe you want, like, they're all tomatoes have different colors and stuff like that. Some are red, some are yellow, some are green. A variety of colors. Maybe one is more appetizing to somebody, and that's what they would want. But this creates a situation that, in a way, makes staying power for whatever has been modified. Because that means that, let's say if you modify some people that are, like, genetically perfect and their immune systems are super advanced and they can fight off diseases like cancer better than a normal person, they might be susceptible to diseases that people who don't have that aren't, right? It creates a more of, in my opinion, staying power between groups, because it expands the species that it's being worked on. Because now there isn't just, like, a tomato. There's tomatoes that are, have a 50% greater yield than, like, a beefsteak tomato or whatever the case may be. That can happen with everything. And then that creates a situation to where it's less likely for one thing to take out all of the species, and more of like individual like little things that could take out small parts of the species, but still have a core that is, you know, relatively strong and would result in extinctions happening less, right? But well, not. I'm pretty sure not everything is susceptible to genetic modification in the same way. It's a little different, you know, for everything. But I know that there's a type of jellyfish that theoretically can live forever, right? It just it replicates itself, basically, kind of similar to like what a starfish does. How, you know, if it cuts off a piece, it asexually reproduces and becomes another one. Similar to that, but it's the same thing, it's the same consciousness for this jellyfish. You know, again, you can say that they don't have consciousness, but whatever. It'll just basically change it from being like a 50-year-old jellyfish to being like a technically like brand new one. And those same things are going into, now they're used in chemistry, kind of similar, and they're converted, you know, they can be converted into human genetics, right? You can take little bits and pieces of animals that like their best gene, like alligators technically can live forever. They just expand and get bigger and then die of starvation usually, or disease sometimes. And you can put that in a human, and then that human will now have that resistance and that gene, right? The thing that I personally feel is like the most important aspect of this is the morality of it, and I know my standing on it. I'll say it after. But what do you guys think about like the morality of doing something like this?
On people or animals?
Either or, yeah.
I mean,
well, for
no, it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So like on people, I think that I don't really see something really wrong with it, because it's more of a benefit than it is like, I mean, there are risks, you know, like you were saying, like
Definitely.
it can make somebody susceptible to something that is not normally susceptible to a human, right? So like, well, whatever. But I don't think there's anything really wrong with it. Like, it's beneficial to us. It's really interesting too. And I think a lot of people would go for it, but then there are going to be those who are like, who think it's wrong to like change what God made, or some, you know, religious people or people who believe that humans should just stay as they are. But advancement is advancement, and change is going to happen either way. So my standing on it is that it's fine as long as you don't take it too far. But as a person, you have to know what too far is, because people have a lot of different ideas of what's crossing the line and what isn't. You know, like what would be considered still human after all these modifications, or what is human even with these modifications, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Eric, you can go.
Oh, right. So I was gonna say that I don't think it would be right or morally justified, really, because the person you're subjecting it to is without their knowledge or without their consent, or really, you're literally taking like a baby and then we're gonna change you genetically to be better, but it's like that fetus that will turn into a child at some point, if you keep it, you don't know what the potential it already holds for it is, and it's like just because there's a disability, something that holds that child back won't always mean that it's worse off, really, because you've seen countless times how people that have disabilities themselves have done great things. For example, Beethoven, right? He was deaf or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, he was deaf, and he's regarded musician and pianist. And then you also have Theodore Roosevelt, which was disabled, and you could argue that he was a very good president at the time. And it's just like,
That was
hmm?
FDR, not Theodore.
Oh, FDR, yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. But then there's also the relevance of what you said earlier, how you need that genetic variation across a species to make sure that they can thrive and stay alive. If you keep on just adding the same traits to every single human being, what's the point? What's the differences between the person? What is it really like that makes them different and stand out from others?
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. All right, Mazbin. do you have an opinion on the morality of it?
I would say my opinion on it. I think it's personally fine because of like it's improvement. Everybody strives for improvement. We can improve our society with that. We would be able to have intelligent people, or like I think that's how far it would go to, right?
Well, I mean, that's the idea. Who knows?
But like yeah, we would like say we could have intelligent more people. We would have people who could like do more advanced jobs instead of like having like majority do like lesser jobs or whatever. So we could have like improvements in our society, have more trustable people. I think I'm not sure how far it would be able to go to.
I mean, of course, theoretically, as far as anybody can, imagine, really, right?
Well, yeah, but I don't see anything morally wrong with genetically modifying people.
I mean, you're asking if they should be like during birth or like in like even when you're grown up
No, like I
or like
mean,
as a baby.
what's your opinion on? Is it like? I'm more asking like your opinion on it. Is it
I mean,
morally something that is okay, or is it not?
I think it is fine. It is fine. Like despite like there can be like risks, right? But it depends on who is getting it. If I were to get it, I would want like I wouldn't want everything to change. I would want certain things to be like modified. Vice versa, like how someone else would who has like a disability,
Yeah.
compared to them, like how that work and all that. So it depends on what type of modification I would want or that person would want.
Yeah, all right, I guess it's my turn. So like, I, I basically like agree with everybody, even Eric, who was playing, in my opinion, like the devil's advocate in the situation. I even agree with that. I agree that there is an inherent like, well, what if you just like left it? What if you just didn't do that, right? What if this never crossed over to being a thing for humans, or maybe there is some an ethical reason as to why it wouldn't be allowed to be worked on babies, right? And or children or whatever without a say in it. Maybe it would have to be something similar to like a child getting plastic surgery. That's something that they can do, but they need the parents. If the kid says they want to do it and the parents are allowing it, then there's not a problem with it. Regardless of your ethical or moral standing on that situation. I feel like this should be the same thing, similar to what Eric was saying, that like the baby thing might be a little too far. It's just an interesting like piece of like, oh well, anything can happen then, right? If they do it to babies, then what can't they do it to? I mean, which is the way that you could say it with anything. For the most part, though, I think that it's fine. Obviously, like it's the aspect of me that's moral and the aspect of me that thinks like science is cool kind of don't like cross over. I think that this is a super cool idea and a super cool topic that deserves to be fleshed out and for people to work in and work on to make it better and more palatable for like society as something that they should do. But I also do think it does pose a lot of ethical issues for people who are, let's say, Catholic, or let's say, other religions who may believe or may start to believe that tampering with God's image is not the right thing to do. It already is. It's already been an issue that's been spoken about to all of the people who are in the field, right? It's an interesting idea, but when you bring it to, well, everybody has to be okay with it. Nobody's okay with everything, especially something as massive as, hey, you can basically change like your skin color if you wanted to. You could say, hey, I could be like orange right? Like, who knows? You can do whatever you want. But it is something, who knows? Who knows where like the bounds are for this? There aren't any. But the hope is that you can, I guess like the main thing is like it's like a fountain of youth kind of thing, right? Like you can live forever based off of this genetic engineering, the modification, using the genes from something else. You could be immortal, technically, right? Or as immortal as humans can be. And then, is that a good thing or a bad thing? There's a lot of questions that all these things bring up, and I feel like they mold more of, they go past the possibility of what's truly possible, and go more into like, well, do you think like morally, ethically, do you think that's something that should happen? And that's kind of like the point of contention for a lot of this stuff, is, well, I don't think that that's right, or I don't think that that's okay, or whatever the case may be. Um, I mean, we're at our time limit. Like, I can talk about this forever. Like, obviously, literally, it's a great topic. But next time we're going to be talking. The person that's going to be talking is Mazavin, and she'll be talking about dictators and how their influence affects government, like governmental systems and other societies. Yeah. Thanks for listening. Bye.
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 Bye.